Hi guys, and welcome to my first painting video, where I'm going to be talking about combining techniques, just to make your life a little bit easier. Not everyone has the opportunity to spend their whole time just painting miniatures, so we really have to optimize the amount of time, or the time that we do spend painting them. So let's jump in. So today we're going to be looking at painting the Bringers of Judgment Successor chapter. So with this painting, we're going to be trying to combine as many techniques as possible to get the job done as quickly as possible, and still get quite a good result. So you're going to see me use a lot of oils and enamel washes just to get the main base color down and get that grim dark effect. But really, I'm just going to be trying to limit myself to as few of those as possible, because obviously don't want to be going out there and buying loads of different oil paints. And then to get that sort of smooth blending, we're going to be trying to blend those oils in on top of everything. Um, and then you're going to see some contrast paints come in as well. But obviously, that's just towards the end to get that muzzle burn that you can see on the weapon. And can't forget, of course, acrylics, which we'll be using just to get that detail, um, those finishing touches on the model. And another last thing as well, which I'll touch upon lately, is pigments as well, but that's mostly for basing. So we're going to start the paint job with a spray, a zenithal spray of grey first on the base, mostly, well, especially covering the base, and then the top of it we're going to cover with a white scar or whatever you have is perfectly fine. I use an airbrush, you don't have to. I actually was trying out those third generation AK interactive paints, but I couldn't quite get the consistency right, so it's come out a little bit matte, but it's not the end of the world. So the first thing I'm going to do, it's not super important. I'm just going to go in with some extra white paint. If you have titanium white, for example, from Procreal, that would be really good. But I'm just using some Corex white, I think, or White Scar white would be good here as well, just to get some of those highlights coming out a little bit more. Doesn't really matter too much because we're going to cover it anyways. Not necessarily a super important step. Um, and then this is something that's a little bit weird because people normally put on streak and grime right at the end in order to get that sort of grim dark effect. But what I'm going to be doing is just putting it down first to get into all those recesses, um, and yeah, you'll see the effect in a moment. Just with this, make sure you give it a good shake. Don't know if you actually need to, but I saw that in a video, so we'll just go with it. I'm just going to absolutely cake it all over the miniature. I did actually notice with push fit stuff, because I didn't glue all of it, it actually started coming apart a little bit, so I don't know if that's to do with the white spirit loosening stuff up that's in the enamel. Um, very likely. So you're going to want to leave that to sit for about 45 minutes. But if you're painting a whole squad, by the time you're done coating the last one, maybe the first one should be getting there. Don't jump the gun too much on this because the longer you leave it, the better the effect, in my opinion. Because again, you're taking material away, so it's quite forgiving, and it's harder to put it back on again, but it's quite easy to take it off. So we're just going to get some cotton buds. I've got some bamboo ones because they're good for the environment, or maybe less bad, should I say. And you can just go in dry. I'm going in dry. Or you can add a little bit of white spirit. It's not going to damage your paint underneath, um, at least not the white spirit. However, if you are rubbing quite hard, and maybe a little bit too much on certain parts, you may start taking off the base layer and the primer. I obviously use the airbrush here, as I mentioned, to do the priming, which may have given it a slightly thinner coat than you might get with a rattle can. So maybe the rattle can is a better choice, um, but just be careful here not to rub too hard. Just wanted to pause the video here to show off what that looks like. I mean, you can almost imagine that if these were painted first, the effect you'd get. Um, some people like to paint before they apply their um, oils and stuff, which is, well, I say some people, most people, um, and then put the grime on top, which I think looks quite good as well. But we're just mixing it up a little bit here. But yeah, so the first thing we're going to try and paint is going to be the weapon. I'm just going to show you guys mixing up a black wash out of oil here. I'm just going to add a little bit of the paint from the tube and a drop of linseed oil. I mean, normal, like for those of you who don't know, oil paints already have linseed oil in them, but we're just going to make it just a little bit more runny, basically. And then another drop of, maybe 2 drops of the white spirits. That's going to help it dry. And yeah, I don't really know actually, but I just know that people add white spirits, so we're going to do that as well. And we're just going to coat the weapon, and any kind of like indents, like the under armor on the back of the knees, some of the gloves, anything that we basically want on black, and just go for it. It's going to look like it's quite heavy, but we're going to leave that to dry for a little bit. Don't know, make yourself a cup of tea or whatever you fancy, a pack of biscuits, and just give it about 45 minutes to an hour. Again, the longer you leave it, the darker it's going to be, and the better it's going to look, because it's going to blend less with the enamel underneath. I think this is probably the one that's most important because you're actually rubbing it off. But yeah, once that's done, we're going to move across to doing the brass. So the shoulder pauldrons, and the gloves and the knee pads. So the basic technique for getting these smooth blends for highlights with oils is going to be using 2 different brushes. With one, we're going to apply the paint where we think the highlight is the strongest. And this is why it's quite an easy technique, because it's super forgiving. Um, Once it's on, you're going to take a second brush, one that's already beaten up, and you're just going to spread it. Um, Basically, just move it away from the sharpest point of the highlight. And then you can repeat that process over and over again until your highlight is basically as bright as you want it to be. Um, and yeah, I'm going to do the same thing with the white now, in this part. So just going to do that all over the backpack. Um, Again, just putting it where I think the highlight's the strongest, and then spreading it out. Admittedly, I might have gone a little bit too heavy on here, but we kind of want that to be striking. And as you can see, that those recesses, because we're using quite a dry brush, we're sort of not going into those recesses, and they've already been stained for us. If you do get into those recesses and you ruin that recess shade, it's not the end of the world. You can just fix it with a wash at the end. Um, Even like Agrax Earthshade or Nuln Oil is going to be perfect for that. But don't be afraid to just put down paint, um, like straight off the paintbrush, in order to get those highest highlights, basically. For this next part, I'm going to be using some pigment. Uh, Admittedly, I probably should use some pigment fixer um, later on, but I'll talk about that in a second. Pigment is going to give us that dusty effect, so we can get that sort of all over the shoes, and it's going to clean up that base quite nicely, flow into those recesses again. So again, we're sort of combining these techniques in order to get different effects, and just do the least amount of work, really. So here I'm going to be using Vallejo's matte varnish, which, it's your standard matte varnish. I kind of was expecting a slightly more matte effect, but I guess I probably should have just used a pigment fixer, instead of a varnish to to activate that pigment. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that. Next, probably a little bit too early, jumped the gun a little bit, but I did the ring, the base. Now, what I use for this is actually a big a big bottle of Vallejo primer instead of using Abaddon Black because I just have so much of it. It's a big bottle. I don't think it's ever going to run out. And it does, however, require sometimes two coats instead of one, but it gives you quite a smooth effect. Just going to use quite a big brush just to coat it on and go from the bottom up to make sure that we're not getting it onto our base, which we've just coated with pigment. Uh, yeah. And for the next part, we're going to be using some speed paints from Army Painter, and we're going to be using them in this order. So the brown, the purple, and then the blue. I actually end up missing the blue in the end, but we're going to use this to create this muzzle burn, and we're going to fill it down with some speed paint medium. Honestly, one of the best products I own is speed paint medium because it's going to let you control those speed paints so much more and get so much more out of them. Um, so here I'm just going to go straight in with the brown. The reason we use this gradient is it's because it's the colors that metal tints to when it gets heated. So we're really going to go for it with the brown. I've gone for quite a striking effect because the rest of the model's quite like toned down, desaturated. So I thought I'd go for it with these muzzles. I'm going to use a wet brush to sort of thin out that edge so it blends better. And then I'm going to apply the purple on the end just to get that more burnt effect. And again, I'm just missing the blue. Then we're going to pull out the acrylics for a last couple of final touches. And you can really take this as far as you want to, but I'm just going to use it to do the eyes quickly. And then a couple of little edge highlights on the pouches and whatnot. But you could really go for it. You could really paint in some lights, paint in anything you really want. Yep. The other things I missed, but it's quite simple. Obviously combining techniques again that are very easy to use. You only really need one of each product, and you can get nice smooth gradients. And because of those true metallic oils that I was using for the brass, you get very nice blends. Um, and yeah, so that's the final product there. Added some tufts as well, just to give it some basing, and that's good. So while I was filming this video, obviously, as you can probably tell throughout, the focus on the camera wasn't great. So unfortunately, my camera lens met a early death because I tried to fix it and only made things worse. So be sure to hit like, and I'll learn how to, well, I'll fix my camera lens and be back to it soon, hopefully. Let me know if you want to see anything in particular. But cheers.